or some people are saying maybe the U.S. shouldn't have anything to do with this Russia-Ukraine conflict. Like, should we stay out of it?
Mm-hmm.
What is our business funneling billions of dollars into Ukraine to give them weapons and training to fight Russia? Like, why? Why not let Russia do what they do? Let them take over Ukraine.
We could do that. We could just say, go ahead and brutalize Ukraine and take it over. But then the whole world becomes less stable, because if we are in a situation in which any country is free to just grab any part of any country that they like, or dominate any country, or invade any country, or attack any country, you've got lots of candidates. War could break out everywhere. And it gives a free hand to leaders like Putin to use terror and in their own interests. I mean, they're already carrying out assassinations all over Western Europe, ignoring the sovereignty of European countries. There are suspicions they've carried out assassinations in the U.S. The only reason they don't do more of that is because they are to some extent constrained. A peaceful world, and a world that respects the rule of law, is an advantage actually to everyone.
I wonder if the U.S. didn't put all those arms into the Ukraine, if there would be much of all this fighting and all this death. If they weren't sort of preempted to fight back against Russia. Like, what would happen if we had nothing to do with it? Would it be the same outcome? Would there be all this fighting? Are we not? Is America not? Is it not in our best interest to funnel all this money into the Ukraine and prop up our military industrial complex and prop up our media and portray Zelensky as this hero, this war hero?
Well,
and put him on the Oscars. Not that we did that, but there was talk about getting him the Oscar.
No, he may yet get an Oscar, but the support for a country. If let's say if we don't support Ukraine, we're going to have a very difficult time supporting those countries that are in NATO. And because although NATO, by and large, taken as a whole, has a strategic advantage over Russia, Russia does have the strategic advantage vis-a-vis the Baltic republics. And they could overrun those republics very quickly.
And the Baltic republics could overrun NATO?
No.
NATO.
Russia could overrun the Baltic republics.
Okay.
Ukraine has a population of 40 some odd million. Estonia is 1 million. Latvia is just a little bit more. So it would be no problem. They could occupy them very quickly if they lose their fear. Having successfully taken over Ukraine without any resistance from the U.S. and any move to support the Ukrainian resistance, under those circumstances, Russia could easily intimidate the Baltics. It could intimidate the countries of NATO, and they have territorial claims in those countries too, by the way. And if they were to succeed, then the NATO alliance would fall apart, and every country would make their own deal with Russia. And we would be faced with a situation in Europe in which a country like Russia, which is run by people who are capable of seizing power by indiscriminately murdering their own people, would be the dominant power in Europe. And that would threaten American security, because we would have, in the absence of allies, of reliable allies, or in a world in which those who are our former allies were making deals with an aggressive power like Russia, we would have very limited ability to withstand them, and we would have very limited ability to react to their provocations. What if they were to decide to carry out terrorist acts on the territory of the United States under those conditions? Our strategic goal is to expand the sphere of security, peace, and rule by law to the greatest extent possible. And if we can't prevent countries like Russia from behaving in barbarous in a barbarous fashion, at least we can limit the damage and contain them to some extent.
Do you think that first of all, what do you think Putin, the psychology of Putin is after all of these years of the U.S. constantly trying to destabilize, creating NATO, basically essentially surrounding Russia? Like, I mean, we have 14 countries are a part of NATO up to the border of Russia.
Mm-hmm. Well, who are those countries? I mean, those are countries that were previously dominated by Russia. The Baltic republics were part of the Soviet Union. The Eastern European countries were satellite countries whose armies were part of the Warsaw Pact. So those countries know what it means to be dominated by Russia. That's why they wanted to be part of NATO.
Okay.
Not because they wanted to attack Russia, but because they wanted to make sure they wouldn't be dominated again in the future, as they were in the past. That's the whole meaning. I mean,
but aren't those countries essentially influenced completely by the U.S.?
No, they're not completely influenced by the U.S., but as members of NATO, they're part of a defensive alliance. And in fact, we have many instances in which there are disagreements within that alliance, particularly on the matter of defense, especially between the U.S. and Germany. Mm-hmm. But the U.S., for example, is opposed to many NATO countries getting their gas from Russia for exactly this reason, that it weakens our ability to contain Russia.
Right.
But those countries who suffered under Russian domination, and that includes NATO countries and non-NATO countries like Ukraine and Georgia and Moldova. They were concerned to become members of NATO, not because they intend to attack Russia, but simply so that they would have protection against being dominated in the future the way they were dominated in the past. Now, it's very interesting that Russia has directed its aggressivity against non-NATO members, Georgia and Ukraine. Georgia was invaded in 2008. Ukraine was invaded in 2014. The NATO countries were not invaded, but they could have been had they not been part of NATO. I mean, Estonia is not a match for Russia. Estonia has only 1 million people, and there are parts of Estonia right on the border with Russia that are completely Russian-speaking and inhabited by ethnic Russians. Now, those people don't necessarily want to be part of Russia, but Russia could always claim that it's acting to defend them, whether they want to be defended or not.
Right, whatever's convenient.
Yeah. So that this whole explanation that we were trying to destabilize Russia's, or that there was some kind of ill intent toward Russia, there was only the intent to make sure that countries that had been part of the Warsaw Pact and had been part of the Soviet Union could no longer be the subject of various intrigues and attempts at destabilization. They would have that stability, and they would have, of course, the reinforcement of NATO for the democratic institutions.